Hi again, how you doing? I hope you're doing amazing so far, learning lots, practicing lots, and in this lesson we're going to be talking about selective color adjustment in detail. Now when we talk about selective color, it's basically in the name if you're wondering what it does. It targets a color and modifies it. That's all there is to it. Now you might say, Unmesh, hue saturation adjustment that we talked about in a previous lesson, it does the same. Yes, it does. However, when it comes to selective color, there are different sliders, there are different aspects, there are different ways in which we modify color, which can be very useful when it comes to color grading or generally modifying the color of an image, making it interesting, or sometimes fixing little things here and there. So without any further ado, let's get started, and as usual, we'll start by understanding how it works and then we'll move on to some real-world examples. So first of all, let's open our demonstration. So I've opened and created a demonstration image for you to understand how selective color works. Now I have already added a selective color adjustment. Let me delete that and let me show you how to add it. By now you might have guessed it already. So to create a selective color adjustment, you click on the adjustment layer icon right over there and then simply choose selective color. It's at the very bottom. So let's go ahead and select that. Now here I have a couple colors. Think of this as an image, right? Now, at the very top where it says colors, you choose the target. You choose which color do we want to target, all right? Which area do we want to affect here? Which area do we want to modify here, right? That's what you select here. This colors drop down, I'm repeating again, this drop down is the target color, right? Let's go ahead and choose a target color. Let's start with reds. Now in this image, this area is reds. It isn't much of a saturation. It's not very bright. It's just a dull red. But now we know that we are going to target the reds. Now, on top of that, you have a drop down called presets. These are presets that you can create your own. Just the presets of these sliders. Don't worry about it right now. All right, just focus on this one, the color. Here you choose the target color that you want to modify. So we chose reds. Now we know in this image, this area is the red area, right? So now if you move the slider, you will notice that only that area is being modified. Okay. Now let's go over all of these sliders. To reset any adjustment, you click on this button. This resets everything. All right. Now, if you want to make the reds more red, you would say, Unmesh, in that case, we would just increase the red slider. But in this case, we do not have any slider that says red on it. So what do we do? Well, what do we have here? We have cyan, we have magenta, we have yellow. So what does that tell us? What do you recall anything? CMY is the opposite of RGB. Cyan is the opposite of red, magenta is the opposite of green, and yellow is the opposite of blue. We learned that in curves. See, basics like these apply throughout in Photoshop. So try to just grasp the basics. Okay, so if we want to make this area more red, what do we have to do? Decrease the cyan. Why? Because cyan is the opposite of red. So decreasing the cyan will increase the reds, add the reds to that area. See that? If we want to take away the reds, we'll take it to the right. It takes away the reds. Okay. So let's take it all the way to the left to make it more redder. Makes sense? Now, keep in mind, we are targeting the red areas. If you want to make yellows a little bit red, you can do that. So let's say you choose yellows. Now we are targeting the yellows. Whatever you do will affect just only the yellow strip right over there. So if you wanted to add reds in the yellow areas, you could do that as well. Just select yellows, and if you take the cyan a little bit to the left, a little bit red is added in that area. Now, the way it's added, it's making it more yellow, but you get the point, right? This is basically the target. Which areas are you targeting? Let's reset it. Now, we are in the reds. We want to make it more red. So take the cyan to the left. Now, if you want to make it more magenta, you would increase the magenta. But if you want to add a hint of green to it, well, what do? You decrease the magenta. You know why? Because magenta is the opposite of green. So if you do that, it kind of makes it a little yellowish. Why does it do that? Because if you try to add green to red, it'll try to make that happen. Okay, now let's try to increase yellow in there. It's making it a little orangish because when you mix red and yellow, you get orange, right? You can decrease the yellow. That would add a little bit of blue to it. Why? Because blue is the opposite of yellow. All right. Now, what is black, you might ask? Well, if you just increase the black, it's going to make it darker. If you decrease the black, it's going to make it a little brighter. That makes sense, right? Because black makes things darker. Adding that makes things darker. If you subtract it, it's going to make it brighter. Now, at the bottom, you have two checkboxes, round checkboxes. One is relative and the other one is absolute. Now, if you look at the scientific explanations of these things, it can take a whole new video, a whole new explanation, and it won't make much of a sense. The only thing that you need to understand here is that a relative is mild and absolute is a little harsh. Makes sense? So if you're making any change in here, absolute will modify it more and a relative will be a little milder, will go a little milder on that. In this diagram, you won't be able to look at much of a difference, but in actual real images, it will make more sense. All right, just keep in mind, if you increase the blacks by 10% in absolute, it'll have more intensity than if you do the same number in relative. That's basically it. Relative is mild, absolute is a little harsh. It's just like overlay and soft light. Soft light is a little mild when it comes to increasing the contrast, and overlay is a little harsh, right? So you can choose whatever works in your image. If you want it a little harsh, you can choose absolute. You can switch between relative and absolute and see what you like. By default, I recommend keep it at relative. Only if you need something extra, you can move to absolute. But that's too not required. We'll talk about that later. And that is basically just duplicated sometimes. That works wonders. Anyway, so whatever color you choose. So at the top, you have the yellows. You can modify the yellows. You have the cyans. I have made the cyan strip right there. You can modify the cyans. So if you increase the cyan, it'll make it more cyan-ish. If you decrease the cyan, have a look. It's making it gray because you take away all the colors in there. Okay. Now you have yellows, blacks. You get all the point here. It's all simple. Now, besides these colors like reds, yellows, greens, cyans, blues, and magenta, you also have whites, neutrals, and blacks. All right. Now, if you choose whites, all of the bright areas closer to whites will be targeted, will be selected to be modified. Now, in this case, most of the colors that I've chosen are on the darker side, so you won't see much of a difference. Only difference you'll see is on this bright area. So you see, we are making changes in here. Just adding black or subtracting black, you get the point. Now, when it comes to neutral, since most of these colors that I've chosen here comes close to 50% gray and is mostly neutral, it's not very bright or very dark. If we choose neutral and try to modify something, you'll notice that all of the colors are being modified, most of the colors. Because for the yellow, I have chosen a brightness of 75, so it's closer to the bright areas. But apart from the yellow, you see most of the colors are being modified when we try to do that. Okay. Now, the next one you have is blacks. Let me reset it. Darks, closer to blacks. In this case, this is a dark strip. If I try to modify it, you will notice that that strip is not being modified. Because right now, reds I have chosen by mistake. So let's go back to blacks. See, only that one is being modified. I haven't chosen any dark color in there. If I had, that would be modified too. So let me just quickly show this to you. If I take a brush, if I sample this color, let me choose the symbol so that it's properly sampled. If I take a dark version of it, so let's take a dark version of this red, and I'm just gonna paint in here, right? Let me just make a dab. with a hard round brush so that it's visible. Now if you go to the properties, if you try to change it in the blacks, you'll see that area is also being modified. See that? So besides these colors, you also have whites, neutrals and blacks. Now let's look at some real-world applications of this. This was just a demonstration to understand how this works, and it's pretty simple. Let me give you a quick rundown again. Now here you have the colors. These are the target colors, or the colors that you want to modify. So if you want to target the red areas, you would choose reds. If you want to target the yellows in the image, you would choose that. The next 4 sliders are basically what you want to add or subtract from that area. If you want to add reds, you would decrease the cyan. If you want to add cyan, you would increase the cyan, right? You have all of it there. Next, you have relative and absolute. Relative is mild, absolute is harsh. So let's say you created something, you moved the sliders here and there, and you liked this setting and you want to save it as a preset. So you can click on this grid right there and choose Save Selective Color Preset. So you can save it any way you want. I'm just going to leave it as untitled. So I have this untitled preset. Let's go to defaults. If I go to untitled preset, it's going to be set to that. You can name it whatever you want. I just left it untitled. Anyway, let's look at some real world examples. Let's see what we have here. So here I have a pretty cool image, but it's lacking in something. You know what it is? If you look at the grass in the background, it's not so green. Wouldn't it be fantastic if it was a lush green? It would really make the subject stand out and make the image a little more interesting and make it pop. Now there are lots of ways to do it. We understand that. We have learned hue saturation. We have learned a lot of other adjustments like vibrance. So how do we do it with selective color? Well, it makes it even more simple because with selective color, you just have to move one slider. So if you click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose selective color, you also get a lot more options. You get an option to add yellows to it. You get an option to add a lot of shades and tints to it. Anyway, so in this case, we want to target the green areas. Now keep in mind, there's a little bit of yellow in there too. So we might also want to do that. So first of all, we want to target the green areas. All right. Now, what do you want to do to the green areas? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. So I want to make it more greener. So there's no green slider here, but there's magenta, and we know magenta is the opposite of green. So all we have to do is to decrease the magenta and have a look. More green is added. So take a look. Here's the before, here's the after, but it's becoming a little brighter. Let's make it a little darker by increasing the blacks. Let's see what happens if we do that. Well, it just makes it more lusher, I must say. If that doesn't work, try absolute. Does it make a difference? Does it make a major difference? Not much, but we'll try. We'll try to keep it absolute. Anyway, let's try adding a yellow to it. So if we add more yellow, it might make it a little better. Also, adding reds or cyans will not help in this case. Now, as I told you, it's not all green. There's also yellow to it. So let's also target the yellows. Now, we want to add a little green in here. So decrease the magenta again. Great. Increase the blacks. Great. Now increase the yellow in there. That's also something we want to do. Let's try to modify the cyan in there. That's not going to help, as I already told you. So this is a lot better than before. So here's the before, here's the after. Going a lot better, but it's not much. Even if we move to relative and absolute, not making much of a difference. Let's keep it relative. So what do we do now? Well, just make a copy. So with the selective color adjustment selected, press Ctrl or Command J, make a copy and have a look. It's now greener. Now with this copy, it's just too much guys. So what do we have to do? We have to go to the greens. We'll try to increase the blacks even more. And in this case, we'll just bring everything back to normal the way it was and increase it just as much we want. We don't want so much in there. Want a little bit of yellow in there. And let's go to yellows. Now, as we choose yellows, there's a yellow a little bit of yellow in her skin too, so that's also becoming affected. So we want to see how much we can move. Now we can always use masks in here, but that much is not required if you ask me. Let's try to increase the blacks. Let's try to switch into absolute. Now in this case, you'll notice that absolute sure is making a difference. So, but in this case, we need relative. Relative kind of works here. Great. Now, let's take a look. Here's the before, here's the after. We kind of fix it. Look at how natural the green looks now. Now, of course, we don't want it on her face and skin tones. So, select the first one, hold the Control or Command, select the second one, click on the second one. Now, both of them are now selected. Press Control or Command G to group them all. Now, let's make a mask for the group. Click on the mask button, take the brush, soft round brush, with black as the foreground color. I'm so sorry about this. Let me just resize the Photoshop document. All right. Now let's paint in her skin tone with black. That's all. You don't have to be super careful here. If you want to be, you can. But have a look. It's such an easy fix. So there we have it, my friend. Here's the before. Here's the after. It's so much more lusher and it's so much more richer and it makes it pop, right? Interesting. Now let's move on to our next example. And in this example, we're going to do something more interesting than fixing stuff. We're going to do some color grading. Let's just drag it and drop it into Photoshop. Now this is already a beautiful image. What if you want to make it more mystical? What if you wanted to make it more magical? Well, you can again do it with selective color. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose selective color again. And in this time, if you're leaning more towards color grading rather than color fixing, you would want to play with whites, neutrals, and blacks a little more than these regular targets. Making sense? No. If you do that, it's really gonna change the mood of your image. Let's start with the whites. Okay. Now, if you want, you can just introduce a little black in there, make it more exciting. See, you have more details in there. Have a look. Here's the before, here's the after. You have more details in the fog, before, after. Details and a little mood. Now, if you want to introduce a little more yellow, we can do that. So that is exciting. You can also go the opposite route and introduce a little blue-ish kind of flame in there, but I'm gonna keep it yellowish. Also, if you want to introduce magenta, you can do that. If you take it to the left, it'll introduce greens. So a little bit of magenta won't hurt. Now, of course, we want to add red, so take the cyan to the left in there. Okay, now take a look at the before and after. Here's the before, here's the after. Look at the bright areas, how we have modified it. Now, you can switch between absolute and relative and see what works for you. Now, this is creating a crazy result because when you're choosing absolute, as I told you, the intensity would be just too high. So if you're choosing absolute, you might have to go easy with the values. So just a 6 or 7% would be equivalent of a relative at 100. So let's keep it relative for that matter. So that's a little subtle. Now let's go to neutrals. Now neutrals, let's first of all control the blacks and the darkness, and then we can come to color. So if we increase it, have a look. Have a look at the drama we add. We don't want to increase it too much, just enough, like this, about 30-31%. Maybe back off a little bit. 25 is fine. Now you can introduce yellow in there, or you can introduce blue. We can also introduce blue in the dark areas. A little bit of yellow won't hurt. Now magenta is the real game changer in this case. So to make it magical, magenta is the color, my friend. So let's add a little bit of magenta. You can try adding a little bit of red in there, but you know, let's take away the red. It's getting too much. But add magenta. Okay, now let's go to the blacks. Now with the blacks, I want to introduce a little bit of blue. So let's take the yellow to the left. And blacks you can take a little more to the right. This would add a little blue in the dark areas. Now you can also increase magenta to make it a little more purplish. So yeah, there you go. Okay, you can introduce cyan for the dark areas and control how much darkness you want in there. So let's compare the before and after. So here's the before, here's the after. Look, already it's getting too magical. Okay, so I feel that some areas are just getting too dark. So we're gonna go back to neutrals and try to control it a little more. Let's come back to blacks again. Let's keep some details in there. Now have a look. Here's the before, here's the after. So much more drama in there. I can go back to neutrals. I feel that we need to just increase the blacks back a bit. Okay, now you can go ahead and choose different colors like reds, yellows, greens, cyans, and then start modifying it. So if you choose reds, and if you want to make it more red, you would decrease the cyan from there. See that? See that haze kind of thing it adds there? Then you can just play with these sliders. Now, you can think logically all day and try to move the sliders, but the easiest way to do it is just move the slider a little more to the right, move the slider a little more to the left. Which one looks good? Right side or the left side? Well, if none of them looks good, keep it in the middle. If one side looks good, slowly and gradually start moving towards that side. So magenta, a little bit is fine. Yellow, I would like to take it to the right. Now you can go to the yellows and see which sides look good to you for which color. So you can start modifying it and stop at the point where you like. Now at the end, you would always want to back things off a little bit. So if you take it to the left, you see details are being created in certain areas. Now, I don't think there are much greens or cyans or blues in this case, but magenta might just be there. No, there are none. Okay, so take a look. Here's the before, here's the after. Now, of course, it's too much. We got crazy in there. So decrease the opacity, slowly and gradually increase it to a point where you like it. We're gonna go with about 60%, just a little bit of it. Look at the color grading. Look, it's looking so much better than before, and it has so much more drama in there. All right, now let's move on to our next example. This was about color grading. This was about how can you use selective color for color grading. Now, when you're doing that, as I told you, you're leaning more towards the whites, neutrals, and the blacks. All right, so for the next one, we have an example where we'll do some extreme grading. We'll try to turn this into night, okay? Not absolutely night, but let's say a sunset scene or an evening scene. And we can do that. As you can see, it's a daylight scene in this case. Let's try to turn it into an evening scene. So selective color. The first thing we're gonna attack here is the whites. Let's go to the whites and make it as dark as possible. So increase the relative black all the way to the right, okay? Now, in sunset, what color are the sky? Yellows, reds, right? So we would introduce yellows a lot in there. It's not working. It's not harsh enough. So what do? We don't go relative in there. We don't go mild in there. We go harsh in there. So let's choose absolute. Now this is too absolute, so we would just back down on the values. All right, let's reset it. Now let's go to whites again and increase the yellows. If you want to increase the blacks, you can do that. It will absolutely increase it. It won't, if you choose relative, it'll maintain the luminosity. But if you choose absolute, it won't care about anything. Okay, so let's just increase the yellows a bit. Okay, now magenta, yes, it'll be a little magenta-ish. It'll be a little red-ish. So we'll decrease the cyan. That looks good. Now let's go to the neutrals. So with the neutrals, of course, they're going to be a little darker. So we would increase the blacks, of course, like this. Now it looks odd because we haven't made the blacks darker, but okay. Anyway, so we can try introducing yellows in there. But if you ask me, they would be more bluish. It's an evening scene that we are creating. Also, we can add a little magenta to it. And we can introduce a little more cyan to it. Okay, We're getting there slowly and gradually. With the blacks, we can increase it a little more so that it just blends in properly. And then, of course, we'll have to introduce a little more blue in there. We'll have to introduce a little more magenta in there. And you can try just introducing cyan. It's getting there. It's not absolutely there. It's a daylight scene. It's an evening scene. It's getting there. Now let's get back to whites. Let's try increasing the blacks a little more. See, slowly and gradually we're getting there. Okay, great. So now let's go back to neutrals. Alright, now lastly the blacks. Now I'm gonna give you a secret cheat sheet that you can apply in here to make it a little more nighty night. But we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so this has gotten us a lot further ahead. The next thing you can do in here is to add a color lookup table, and it comes with a preset called night from day. Let's apply it, and it does the job in most cases. So here's the before, here's the after. Now of course it does convert these grasses and adds color in a way that it really does look night, but it takes away the highlights. So you would want to double click on the right hand side of this layer, take it away from the bright areas by taking the slider of the underlying layer from right to left, just like this. Now this is harsh, so hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the slider to break it apart and take it all the way apart, like this. This side as well, all the way apart. Now take a look. It's absolute night, isn't it? Now I would decrease the opacity and increase it slowly and gradually to a point where it looks a little believable. Alright, let's go with 75-ish, and there you have it. Daylight scene, night scene, evening scene, I must say. Daylight scene, evening scene. Pretty good, isn't it? Alright, now this might be an extreme case, but I just wanted to show you what you can do with selective color. What are its possibilities when you just go a little too extreme? Did you know that you can also gain some great control over black and white conversions with selective color? Yes, you can. So in a previous lesson, we talked about some great black and white conversion using gradient maps. So let's do the similar thing in here. First of all, let's make sure that the foreground and the background color are black and white. Press D for default, which is black and white if it's already not. So if it's some red or orange and the background color is something else, some crazy color in there, so you're gonna choose in green. If you press D, it'll set to default colors. Now, let's create a gradient map, and by default, it'll be foreground to background, and it'll create a great black and white image. So here's the before, here's the after. It's already brilliant. All right. Now, what if you want a little more control? Now you must be thinking, Unmesh, there's a black and white adjustment in there that we can use, and it allows us to control the brightness of each and every area, which is pretty cool. But if you wanted to do it a different way, you could do it. So gradient map is something we like for black and white conversions. At the bottom, if you create selective color, you will also have some great control over the brightness. Now, if you choose black and white, regular black and white adjustment, you have control. You do have control. But what you do not have in here is the control over the whites, blacks, and the neutrals. That you do not have. But with selective color, you have that and also the control over individual colors. So if you turn on selective color, on top of that, there's already an adjustment layer which is making it black and white. So now we can come back to selective color, which is at the bottom, and now start making changes in here. So you can go to the blacks and make it even blacker. See the contrast that we are adding? You can choose a relative in there, choose absolute, see which one feels good to you. Absolute will be, as the name suggests, absolutely absolute. It won't worry about whether we are losing details or not or anything. It's just will be too intense. All right, start with relative always. If it doesn't work, only and only then try to move to absolute. Okay, now let's go to neutrals. We're gonna make it even more darker. Now introducing a color might make changes as well, so you might want to experiment here as well. But basically, let's just make it a little more darker. If you just move this, it'll make a particular type of change, but most of the changes will be done with black. That's it. Because we are working in a black and white scene, it really doesn't matter much. Let's choose white. Now you can just introduce a little more detail or add a little more highlight depending upon what you want. Now apart from this, you also get control over the colors. Now we have already increased the contrast. Have a look. This is the before regular black and white. This is the after. Look at the contrast that we are adding. Now on top of that, we can go with, let's say, yellow, and now we can control the brightness of it, how much we want or don't want. So if we decrease it, there's a little brightness coming on the face. If we choose reds, see, the light from the back gets activated. Pretty good, isn't it? So you can choose how much of it do you want. There's greens, you can control how much. So if you decrease it, have a look at the trees. It gets brighter. If you increase it, it gets darker. If you would like to keep it in the middle. Cyans, if you increase it, you have more details, a little more details in the buildings. Let's go to the blues. If you increase it, probably it just adds more details in some bright areas. But that's basically it. And I don't think there's much magenta in there, but you get the point. So I increase the blue, there's more detail in the buildings. Anyway, so this way you can really control different areas. Have a look. You can really control the light that's coming from the back by just moving on to the reds. I can go to neutrals, make it even darker, but you really can control the lights by going to reds. There's no light in there. If you take it to the left, there's light coming in from the back, which is pretty cool. So have a look. This is the before, black and white, just a regular black and white by gradient map. This is the after. You get a lot more control over which areas you want to light, which areas you want to darken, with how you want to modify or render each color. Okay, let's move on to our next example, and this is just about enhancing colors. Now we have already talked about enhancing colors using saturation mask, and I remember also creating an action for it. There's another way besides saturation masks, besides vibrance as well. So by now we have learned 2 ways to enhance colors. Number 1, saturation mask. I think I shared an action, or I taught you how to create an action for it. Let me just quickly load it. This is the saturation mask action. Okay, so let me just play it. So it'll create a hue saturation adjustment layer along with a mask based on saturation, and I shared with you how to do that. If you increase the saturation using this method, it's kind of not working in this case and not looking nice, not making the image pop. You can also try vibrance. So let's try vibrance in there. That's helping. That's a little better in this case. So it depends upon case to case. Now there's one more way to enhance colors. You guessed it right. This is a lesson about selective color, so it's selective color. So let's choose selective color. And all you have to do here, you can also create a preset for this or create an action for this, up to you. So when you come to reds, right, just decrease the cyan all the way to the left. Or in other words, you can say increase the reds. Okay, when you're in reds, increase the reds. When you're in yellow, increase the yellow. When you are in green, increase the green or decrease the magenta, because magenta is the opposite of green. When you are in cyan, increase the cyan. When you are in blue, increase the blue. Or in other words, go back on the yellow. Yellow is the opposite of blue. When you are in magenta, increase the magenta. Okay, now we have just modified most colors. You don't have to modify the whites and the neutrals and the blacks. That's not needed. Now you can switch between relative and absolute and see what works best for you. I'm going to keep it relative, and let's create a preset out of it. So click on this grid and save preset, and you can just name it enhance color. And there you go. Just take a look. Here's the before, here's the after. It's also very, very natural. Now what I would do with this is also just add a little curves and probably increase contrast. Now I already told you how to create an S curve to increase the contrast. Also there are some presets here as well for increasing contrast. That's also pretty cool that you can try and modify as well. That's cool. Okay, there you go. Some increased contrast and some color popping in there. If you want more, just duplicate it. more color. And I didn't want too much green in here, so we'll select the mask with black as the foreground color. Just paint on in here. Make sure the flow and opacity are at 100. Yes, that's pretty good. Okay, so here's the before, here's the after. With a little color pop. If you didn't want too much of it, select all three, press Ctrl or Command G, and then slowly and gradually increase to whatever value that looks good. So for this one, we're gonna go with about 65%. And there you have it, a little bit of color enhanced. Now for this example, I feel that we need to have a little exciting sky in there. So let's create a stamp visible layer at the top, just for simplicity. By the way, if you're wondering how did I create it, we created a brand new layer and then we pressed Ctrl Alt Shift and E. Alright. Then simply go to Edit, Sky Replacement. If you're using a later version of Photoshop, you will have it. Or you can manually also replace a sky. You can choose a sky of your choice. So in this case, there are lots actually you can choose from. These, and there are some dramatic ones that you can choose. There are these. These won't really fit in this case. There's a lot of fog and mist in there. So I'm not really sure whether clouds will look good, but you can always try. This is okay. You know, you can try to match in the color by just increasing the color adjustment in there. Also increasing the lighting adjustment to kind of match it. You can also move the sky up and down and see if it works. You can just try increasing or decreasing the temperature. Probably let's try decreasing it, and I would make it a little more brighter so that it matches more. Yes, that matches better. And there you go. A little bit of sky, you know, won't hurt. It's a little better than nothing in there. So anyway, that's how to enhance the color a little bit. So you have learned 3 ways to enhance the color: saturation mask, vibrance, and number 3, selective color. Every time you want to enhance the color of a particular thing, so let's say you want to enhance the color of this photo. Do I already have it open? I think I do. So if I remove the black and white thing, let's create a selective color. And if you choose that preset of enhance color, you will notice the color is enhanced. See, in this case, it was not required, but we'll try it on other images as well. So let's try it with this one that we worked on before. The colors are already beautiful, but let's try enhance color in there. Selective color. Let's try enhance color. And in this case, it does really enhance the color and it looks good. So here's the before, here's the after. Look at the enhanced color. That's how to do it. You can just control the opacity or move between relative and absolute. See what looks better. But in little color modification, when you're not modifying the whites and the neutrals and the blacks, relative and absolute doesn't make a hell lot of a difference. And that's basically it. Okay. Now let's move on to our very last example. And in this example, I'm going to show you how can you use selective color to just change the mood, to change it to autumn, right? So let's say you want to just change this scene to look as if it's in fall. So let's first of all make it a little brighter. It's just too dark. Okay. If you want to add a little contrast, you can do that too. We can come back to this later. That's the advantage of adjustment layers. Absolutely non-destructive. You can come back to it if you feel like you shouldn't have made that change or you want to modify something. Anyway, so let's create selective color on top of that. Now, everything we see green, we want to make it more warmer. We want to make it more yellowish. So first of all, let's start with the yellows because these are yellows too. Now, if you want to make it more yellow, so first of all, take the yellows all the way to the right. Now, you can try increasing the magenta or decreasing. Now, decreasing the magenta would make it more green, which we don't want. So take it to the right. We want to introduce reds. So take this to the left. And already we are making a ton of progress. Let's go to the greens. We want to make it more yellow. We want to increase the magenta as much as we can. If we do absolute, it just helps a little bit. So here's a relative, here's absolute. Let's do relative. Let's introduce reds. And if you go to yellows and try to make it brighter, that makes it green. So that doesn't help. So we're going to keep it this way. And it really does our job. There we go. So easy. Here's the before, here's the after. We made it fall. If you want a little more of this, make a duplicate. Now in this duplicate, it's looking way too red. So we'll just increase the cyan, control the magenta a little bit. Let's go to the greens and similarly in here, play with the values and see what works the best for us. Now in the end, one of the things that you can do in here to make it more autumn-ish is add a color lookup table. But before that, I feel that I've added too much on the face. So we can create a group of both of these selective color, press Ctrl or Command G, create a mask as we did before. Now you can just erase it from the face in there, or you can totally erase it from the subject. You can select the background layer and click on select subject. Now to see select subject in there, you need to have the quick selection tool, magic wand, or the object selection tool activated. Anyway, once you have the selection of the subject, come to the mask with foreground color as black, press Alt backspace. So it's now taken away from our subject, which is pretty cool. Now on top of it, we can create a color lookup adjustment, and you can choose just the right LUT here, that is fall color. It says what it does. So here's the before, here's the after. A bit too much. Let's go with about 60%, and that's how you do it. Here's the before, here's the after. And you can always go back in curves, and if you want to just add a little contrast, you can do that. But this looked great to me, if you ask me. There you go, my friend. So that's how you can use selective color to do a variety of things. All you have to keep in mind is this: selective color just targets a color and modifies it. You can add a particular color to it. You can take away a particular color from an area. You can look at it in both ways. Also, besides all these colors, you can also target the whites, the neutrals, and the darks. If you're doing more heavy color grading, the whites, neutrals, and blacks should be your main focus. If you're fixing something, maybe colors should be your main focus. Or if you're changing or modifying the color should be your focus, as we did in this example. We changed the greens to yellowish, reddish, brownish. You get the point. I hope this lesson helped you. I hope it again encourages you to go ahead, try this adjustment with your images. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.